I'm Dan Kabinski with the Society of Professional Journalists International Community. Today is Sunday, March 1, and the major item in the news for the past 24 hours has been the U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran and Iran's counterattacks. Reporters around the world are covering this issue, and basically we are all calling or texting our sources trying to put the events of the day into context. And please note that I did say all our sources. Good journalists talk to as many people as possible to fit the pieces together. And yet the reports coming out of the current Voice of America language services seem to consist only of quotes from White House statements and citations of what administration officials have said to other news outlets. This is not the VOA that existed from 1942 until March of last year. With me is Patsy Widakuswara, and I hope I got that right. I apologize. I'm terrible at names. Patsy was, until March 2025, the Voice of America's White House correspondent. She is currently part of a lawsuit seeking to restore the VOA after the Trump administration put about 1,300 journalists on administrative leave. So, Patsy, thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule to be here and talk about this.
Thank you, Dan. Pleasure to be here.
You had earlier posted on social media that about what VOA reporters pre-March 2025 would have been doing right about now. Could you walk us through what the Voice of America journalists, who are employees of the U.S. government news agency, how they would have handled this story?
Well, we'll start with my team at the White House. I was White House bureau chief from 2021 until we were put on admin leave last year, March 2025. Our team would be very busy, obviously. There are 11 people covering the White House from various services, not just the Farsi language, but also Mandarin, Spanish, Russian, Ukrainian, Dari, Pashto, Indonesian. All of us will be working our sources, getting information, and feeding it into our newsroom. Our colleagues who are correspondents at the congressional correspondent, the State Department, the Department of the Pentagon, Department of Justice, National Security correspondents, we will also be working our sources and feeding information, getting information to help support the reporting from not just English, but also 49 languages in total in Voice of America. So our teams would also be analyzing content that's coming out of Iran. Our foreign bureaus will be reaching out to get world reactions. And there will be VOA teams from all various language services reaching out to ordinary Americans, including diaspora groups, not just Iranian communities, but also diaspora groups from other communities and other other nationalities, to give a full picture of how Americans are reacting to this event. So in essence, we will be talking to officials, we will be talking to lawmakers, we will be talking to experts, analysts, human rights groups, we'll be talking to Americans, and we'll be talking to other countries to give Americans a full picture. To give our audiences a full picture, because that is our mandate, to tell America's story through factual, accurate, and balanced and comprehensive journalism. And that is not what is happening in VOA today.
I was wondering if you would just get into a little bit of how you see what's happening today versus the journalism that you and your colleagues did pre-March 2025.
Yeah, so right now we really are a shell of our former self. There were more than 1,000 journalists and staff in VOA pre-March 2025, and as well as contractors. And right now there's a skeleton crew of about 100 people. That is less than 10% that what we used to be of journalists and staff, and they are working almost nonstop covering this. And honestly, they do not have the resources, because Carrie Lake, when she put us all, almost all of us, on admin leave in March 2025, she killed our 24/7 operations, and she has never revived it. And so these people, if you can imagine, there's 100 people who are working without news wires, who are working without the resources to cover news basically because they cannot send reporters on the ground. So we are producing largely content that's reflective of the administration's point of view. And that has never been our mandate. Our mandate has been to tell America's story, not just the administration story. Our mandate has been to be an authoritative source of news, and we have done that for 80 plus years. Um, and reaching 360 million people around the world every week through 4,200 television, radio, and digital media partners around the world who are not getting our content right now.
You mentioned the cutting off of the access to the wire services and others. You also lost access to broadcasting facilities to reach people around the world. Could you talk just a little bit about how that loss has impacted what VOA can do and or what did do and should do?
Yeah, I think there's this sense that VOA is this old-timey radio station broadcasting, piercing the Iron Curtain. But I think what people need to understand right now is that the lion's share of our content is reaches our audiences mostly through television. And of course, you know that television is a very labor-intensive industry, and it's also a very infrastructure-heavy industry. So we have, of course, transmissions infrastructure, we have studio infrastructure, we have everything from graphics, from studio hand, all sorts of technical support that's needed to get our content out there. And so what Kerry Lake has done is has canceled a whole bunch of contracts in terms of satellite. There's also transmission that's been cut in several countries. So all of this points to the fact that we simply cannot do our work. We do not have the journalistic resources to do our work. We do not have the infrastructure to do our work. And don't forget that we have been called in to surrender our equipment. This happened last year. So, there's all this camera, there's all these laptops, all our phones. We had to surrender all of that. And there's absolutely no accountability. We don't know where that equipment has gone to. So I find it really mind-boggling that there's about 100 of us who are overworked, while there's hundreds more of us who are forced to stay home. And meanwhile, Kerry Lake is hiring contractors and relying on what she called publicly search programming, which is bringing in people when news break. And to me, that is an absurd idea. It's like calling in meteorologists only when it rains.
Um, the issue is that the administration wants VOA to only present its position. Now, this sounds more like propaganda than actual news reporting. Could you comment on that for me, please?
Yeah, so VOA is mandated by law actually not to do that, exactly not to do that. We were not created to be the administration's mouthpiece, any administration's mouthpiece. When President Gerald Ford signed the law, VOA Charter in 1976, our mandate was very clear. It's to be a reliable and authoritative source of news to tell America's story through the world, through factual, balanced, and comprehensive information. It is, as our slogan says, the news may be good, the news may be bad, we shall tell you the truth. And I think the people who created that law, the lawmakers who created that law, understood what I know personally as somebody who grew up under a dictatorship in Indonesia, which is that to anyone who's been exposed to state propaganda, there is nothing more inspiring than a journalism that reflects a nation so confident that they are unafraid to confront their own flaws, and of leaders who are not afraid of scrutiny. And that is the kind of journalism that VOA has been bringing to the world that includes all sorts of information, including critiques and dissenting views to the administration, because that is when audience will build trust in our products, in our programming. And we can see that we have lost a lot of our audiences, if not most of our global audience, 360 million weekly global audience, because A, we haven't been producing that kind of journalism that we promise, and we have lost the majority of our languages. Right now, we are only broadcasting in 6 languages out of the 49.
Your point that you made that people who lived under dictatorships or those with news organizations that only presented propaganda recognize propaganda when they see it. I think that's an important part, that people are recognizing some of the deficiencies in the current reporting. I just want to close out with just any last thoughts you might have about the way Voice of America and its sister organizations, um, how they work at a time when the U.S. is engaged in military actions. Because let's face it, you are U.S. government employees, but you are also a news organization. So how do you thread that needle?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. VOA is congressionally funded. We are funded by American taxpayers' money, although, if you look at it, our budget is 200 million for FY 2026, and that comes down to about $1.50 per American taxpayer per year. And for that, you get, to support good journalism to people around the world who need it, and you also support an instrument of American soft power. Of course, there has been administration pressure, even though there is this VOA charter, a law that protects us from editorial interference. For example, when I first came in 2003, a few days later, the Iraq War broke, and there was some pressure from the administration to focus on that kind of war programming. Under the Obama administration, there's a lot of pressure for us to produce violent extremism, anti-violent extremism content. So there's always been administration attempts to influence our programming or our content. However, no administration has gone so far as to dismantle our agency, saying outright, making it very clear that our independent journalism does not align with the president's agenda. And that is exactly what's happening right now. And that is one of the bases of our lawsuits. But you have to understand that state funded doesn't mean state run. And that's how we are different than RT, how we are different than Xinhua, because we do have that protection from the VOA charter that protects our editorial independence. And that has been the thing that made us the most successful in telling America's story to the world, in becoming this, formidable power of America, formidable tool of American soft power. Um, if there's one thing that I want to add to all of this, Dan, is that I've been really thinking about my Persian colleagues who have been forced to work under the situation. I cannot imagine the kind of stress that they're going through. First, they're working for a newsroom that has been traumatized, an agency that has been smashed to pieces by the administration. And second, they are working without any resources. They're working without being able to send people on the street. They're working without any kind of news wires. They're working where a lot of the infrastructure has been dismantled. But they understand that this is information that people back home in Iran, for them, really relies on, at least, when we still had an audience there. And don't forget that many of them still have family and friends in Iran, and they must be worried about their loved ones. So I just cannot imagine the kind of stress that our friends, our colleagues from the Farsi service, who are continuing to do their work as courageously and bravely as possible. And I really hope, I really just wish that we can be there to support them.
The SPJ and all journalism organizations join you in that hope, and we do hope that your colleagues do pull through this and that their families are safe in this climatic time. Um, Patsy Widakuswara, Voice of America, uh, White House correspondent. Thank you very much for taking time. I know you've got a very busy weekend, and we really do appreciate you coming in and talking with us.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.